This piece of writing, which I've called A Derelict Building, was made probably about 20 years ago by me as a kind of exercise, I think, in short story writing. And the story itself is a kind of abstract moment in the middle of the night, which I remembered. So possibly I remembered it in the middle of the night, and the experience I had was in the middle of the night on a road from Stromness to the Black Craig in Orkney, somewhere in the middle of the 1980s. So it's kind of partly an experience I had and partly a dream of an experience I had and part of an experience of a dream I had, and etc. through and through itself. And then the sound that goes with this is a piece that was made in collaboration with Jamie Hall and Callum Mcaskill for a kind of poetry madness event that we gave at in the Arches in Glasgow in 2011, so 13 years ago. It was called Treadmill Poets, and I made a large treadmill with a megaphone, and between Jamie mixing and making sound and Callum and I delivering poetry and performance from the treadmill, from amongst the audience, in the kind of stinky darkness that was the Arches at the time, all seemed to fit together. Plus this breaking of heartbeat waves and thought patterns. So, here it is. A Derelict Building. A derelict building. Salt on the air always. Even in this viscous darkness, he knew where the sea was. Navigating more by memory than any other sense, he meandered from one verge to another, using the bounce of his boot off tarmac like a sonar to locate his position. Only 1 mile now before home, before the enveloping familiarity of his own front porch, like re-entering his skin. Cat around his ankles, kettle already warm on the stove. The wind was at about 15 knots, enough to blow hair across his face and throw around the threshed stalks of docken and sedge along the margins of the field. To his right, a steel gate played an intermittent harmonic, an agricultural flute. He was half of the way from one place to another. This dark spot on the road, this invisible line fold in the page surface of the mirror. One step in either direction would constitute a decision, a commitment, bias, imbalance, weight. At just such a place, he was always lost and beyond hope. From here it seemed always as though there were no more steps to take, that this perfect balance was never to be broken, and he was trapped by the spell of stasis. Here, he was lost forever and beyond all recognition. Sense was lost along with senses, and his mind crossed and returned like a pendulum swinging over a point of knowledge.
When See how
Light! Forever!
With each swing, the pendulum passed out of sight.
Yes.
He became dizzy, felt unable to stand. His pulse became the rhythm of the waves on the shore, and his state shifted from waking to dreaming in an arc of consciousness.
See how
Time swung around like a weather vane. No clarity, no progression.
I love you.
His body became a door through which he passed repeatedly. All of the journeys that he had already made past this place, and all of the journeys that he might make, a river of thought flowing in both directions at the
See
same
how
moment.
you taste. Yes. I love you.
His face was wet. For a moment he imagined that he had been standing here, crying into the night, giving his salty tears to the elements. Human precipitation.
See how you
He had become part of the eternal cycle of water, from land to sea, to air, to land.
my actions.
Standing rooted into the ground, drawing up water through his legs, his arms and fingers swollen with fluid. Water pressure had built up inside him until it began to push out all the hairs all over his body and to run down his skin in cascades.
Thinking about my
His shoulders were heavy, their weight oppressive, a conspiracy with gravity, a surrender to descent. His day had been long. Where had it begun? Not in these clothes, no. First into his body in the morning had been water, warm from the night in his thick glass. That was almost 17 hours ago since standing, and the soles of his feet had kept contact with the earth for every one of those hours, or at least had taken turns, and now he felt as though they had broken through the crust, and he was sinking slowly, a stricken vessel. The air on his face was hot and fetid. He held his breath, tried to make his nostrils and his mouth small, tried not to think about his dependency on air, his unbreakable habit, a lifetime of oxygen highs and carbon dioxide lows. Air trickled into him, permeated down through the layers of his flesh and into the caverns of his chest. Each bronchiole swelling like a party balloon, one at a time. His heart began to slow, to thicken, to gag, pulling stagnant blood through choked veins. His eyes clouded. It seemed that he was flying across the surface of the earth, his clothes torn to rags and the weight of air upon his head pressing into his neck and into his shoulders. He was supersonic, like a bolt of lightning, travelling to all places, flying out from his own centre in all directions, an explosion of hope. His eyes clouded. No. The wind had picked up, pushed past him at 40 knots in lumps and cold. Clouds were flying in from the west, and cutting over the face of a shocking moon. Its colourless light stabbed down between accumulating nimbus and scalded the surface of the ocean. Between the man and the moon was a shadow, a silhouette, taller than him and strong. He tried to turn, but he was held. The shadow leaned in, its decaying breath making his eyes water. It breathed him in, all of him, summarized him with one inhalation. He stepped forward. There was nothing between him and the rain as it veered over black cliffs. The dog that had danced with him faded, becoming part of the shadows in a cottage doorway. He had crossed his own boundary now.